Welcome to the Insight Edit, the podcast that unpacks what's behind video, all the ins and outs. And this week, we're going to talk about the secret weapon, sound. Harry, where do you think we should start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sound is the forgotten element of film and video. Or at least it can be. It's, you have to remember that it is half of what you're seeing. And because, vision is our primary sense, we're so used to just thinking... Vision.
It's got to look beautiful.
Absolutely.
Every scene's got to be meticulous, which of course it has.
But half of what you're watching at any time is sound,
yeah.
And it really can massively change the mood, the feel, what you're paying attention to. It really, really changes what you're...
I think also, and I'm sure I've heard this quote somewhere, that we hear through our eyes. We, like you said, visually we watch stuff, right? But what we don't consider when we're watching that is the power that sound has to make us feel something inside. Because it is the sound that does that. It's not just the visuals on its own.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say you hear through your eyes, because I think in everyday life, you can be hearing all sorts of noises around you, but when you look at something, that's what you hear.
Absolutely.
So if you look at a car going down the street, you'll hear that. Whereas you might then look somewhere else and hear.
Yeah.
You're still always hearing all those sounds, but your attention shifts. Whereas with film, the sound designer is going to pick out what you hear. So it's not down to what you're looking at. It's actually being decided by the filmmaker.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to reverse psychology that a little bit when you're putting together a sound mix and put in the sounds of the things in the image that you want people to look at. And those conscious decisions can really affect how people perceive something that they're watching.
Oh, 100%. So why don't we just unpack that a little bit? Mm-hmm. So let's take perhaps production that we're working on at the moment, okay? And we've gone out there, we filmed something. So let's talk about Draper. Actually, Draper's probably a good one to talk about, isn't it? So, you went on set, you were the director on the set, you went on set, but did you have thoughts around what the sound would be before you went out on set, even though it was a live action shoot, and obviously we were filming everything with actors, etc.? Were you thinking about what are the sounds that I want the audience to really hone in on and to bring out the power of that moment in the film?
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, this was a film promoting this new toolbox container. And so we were shooting on a building site with, construction work going on around us. It was a live site in the background. And so, on the day, there's all sorts of construction noises. There's people banging things, there's lorries beeping up and while they're backing up and stuff like that. So it was a lot of sound going on, and you might think, well, let's just include all of that because that's the sound of the environment. That makes sense. So you could then make the whole film, edit it, and just put in the sound that you recorded on the day. And what's wrong with that? It's just it's a building site. That's what it sounds like. But you have to remember that's not necessarily what you want people to be focusing on when they're watching the film. They're not yes, they are on a building site, but the point is, you're advertising the box, and that's what you want people to focus on. So it's more important that the sounds of the box, the clamps and the hinges and the things that, we want to present the product as a high quality. So we want to make sure that when we record those sounds of the boxes, we do that properly and we put that to the forefront of the mix and not just the noise that's going on in the background. So you just have to be conscious about the decisions you're making, about the things that you want people to focus on.
I'm just going to pick up something you said about the product. We wanted the product to come across as very high quality, of which it is. So how did we go about making sure that the focus was on the product, but also making sure that those sounds made the audience feel like it was a really high quality product that they were watching?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have like an intuitive sense of when something sounds like it's made well, or it's got good production quality in the product. So it's just about making sure that because you can record the same object in doing different things, and it can come across sounding well made, or it can come across sounding cheap and plasticky, depending on what you do with it. And so, when we were recording Foley and adding it to the mix and things like that, you want to just make sure that you're being selective about which sounds sound good and which ones don't.
Yeah.
In the same way that you would do that with picture. You might view it from a certain angle and it looks really great. And actually, the client picked up on this. We recorded it front on, and you don't get any sense of how big the box is in terms of depth. And so they actually said to us when we framed it up, and they went, can we just angle it a little bit so we get a more dynamic view? Which is the same with sound. You just want to make sure that the sounds that you're putting in show that product auditory.
Yeah.
In that same quality that you would.
So I'm going to just pick up on
envision.
something you said there about Foley. For the audience that doesn't know what Foley is, do you just want to explain a little bit what Foley is and perhaps where it comes from?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so Foley is something that you'll see in any sort of narrative, TV or film. And it's basically what people don't realise is when they're watching a film, every single sound that they're hearing, with the exception of the
Speech.
the dialogue that the actors are speaking, all of that other sound is created in post. So in post-production, meaning
Yeah.
the editing process. So yeah, every single thing will have gone through and been recorded individually. There'll be people in a room watching the film silently, and then as somebody's walking along, they've got a pair of shoes on the table and they're making the footstep sounds. And literally every single sound
Yeah.
is individually recorded, layered up into a sound edit, and then mixed together. So it sounds like it's just, that's just what they recorded on the day
Yeah.
when they were filming it, but it isn't at all. And so that's what Foley is. It's going through and recording each one of those individual sounds and then adding them into
Yeah.
the edit.
And of course, we don't do Foley, although we do some Foley here. Let's be fair, on some projects, we have gone and done our own separate Foley to kind of bring things to life, haven't
Yeah,
we?
we have occasionally.
Let's talk about sound when it comes to stock footage imagery, okay? Because there are films out there which look absolutely amazing and they've been made with stock, okay? So ASMR has become incredibly popular in the social media world, hasn't it? Really bringing those moments to life, and it could be something as simple as going out for a walk in the field or going out for a walk in the woods, isn't it? And filming lots of different parts of the woods and then bringing those all together to make, frankly, a quite amazing piece of content that's like 10, 30 seconds. So could you just talk us through the process of how do you kind of get to that point where you work out, well, what are the sounds of, not necessarily the leaf, but how do you draw that audience, make them feel like they were there on that walk with that person?
Yeah, absolutely, because sound has the ability to really change the mood and emotion of what you're seeing. And I think what people might tend to do in the first place is just try to be very literal with it. So if they see a piece of water sloshing around in a glass, they will go and record some water sloshing around in the glass. But actually, it's all a bit more psychological than that. And if you want to emphasize sort of the grandeur of this drink, then you're promoting it as this huge thing and you're really, really close up, so maybe it's a macro shot. Maybe you don't want to record water in a glass, you actually want to record waves in the ocean. And you overlay that, and because people are so focused on what they're seeing, actually the sounds can go a little bit unexamined when they're watching it, and it can feel a bit like, yeah, that just makes sense, And so there's all these opportunities when you're recording something. We've done stuff with donuts before where we've had crumbs hitting the tops of donuts. And yeah, you could record some breadcrumbs bouncing off something, but it's going to sound like almost nothing. But what we've actually done is added, rocks crumbling down the outside of a mountain. We've gone and found that sound effect online.
It heightens that moment, doesn't it?
It does.
It
It
really
heightens
that moment, and you get more of a sensory feel about it. Obviously, you can't taste the image, but you kind of can taste the image, can't you? You can kind of imagine what that moment is like to pick up that donut with all the crumbly bits on the top and bite into it.
Yeah.
Because of the sound.
Absolutely, yeah. It's sort of poetic. It's sort of that suggesting something more than being literal about what it is. It's a case of just bringing out, making something sound bigger or sound more powerful or sound more quieter. You've seen it in the other respect as well, where you could have this huge thing that you're depicting, and then you just have really subtle sound, and it can just massively change the mood and the feel of what you're saying.
So let's take something talking about big moments, little sound, or is it like a sound where you're trying to get the audience to kind of think about what's coming, isn't it? I mean, horror films are a great one for doing that, right? Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily the bangs and the crashes or making someone jump. It's actually drawing that audience in definitely through the sound, and obviously the camera movements have matched up together. So I think think about our kind of the world that we work in, and we films that we create for clients. What if you were to take something like elevating a talking head with sound? Mm-hmm. How would we go about doing that? And I think some of that is probably the lead up into the actual moment where they sit down. What is the kind of feeling we want the audience to have, that anticipation we want them to have? Is it the big wide shot of the room where the CEO walks in and there's just footsteps? There's no sound, there's no sting, It's just the footsteps of him coming through the door. It's him moving the chair slightly and the sound of that. And all of that kind of, again, we've talked about this already, but that heightens the moment. Well, what is he going to say? You're setting the mood before
That's
that
it, yeah.
anticipation,
And
isn't it?
It's really important to bring out that idea of setting something up as you're leading up to something, because, again, when you're thinking about sound, you might think that let's just focus on the sounds that are playing over an image at that specific time. But actually what's really important to take into account is what sounds have you had playing leading up to that moment. And building that sense of anticipation, or that sense of grandeur, or whatever it is that you might want to build in. That soundscape that you build before something happens can really set the tone for what you're going into.
And I think we're talking about soundscapes here and sound design. And I think a lot of people may not understand what that actually means, sound design or soundscapes. Because I think a lot of the time, especially in a lot of the stuff that we do, and I think other agencies do as well, is the classic talking head, the day in the life of. So, but what the EVCOMs recently were a great example of this, where they use sound to like great importance to draw the audience in. And that sound was designed. That's not picked off a library somewhere. There are whole sound designers out there, especially in the world of film, and definitely in our world as well now, and broadcast. And they are sort of masters at, orchestrating. They're almost like the conductors of the film in some respects, aren't they? The conductors of the sound within the film, and that they are really important. And like you say, it's kind of making those moments through sound more intimate when it's not an obvious moment, isn't it? So, you think of film like, two couples fall in love, they come together, there's no sound. But could you do something where sound is unexpected? You talked about the wave in the cup, right? Those unexpected moments can sometimes draw out more feeling, the kind of psychological memory of like, oh, I sort of recognise that sound. It draws them back to their childhood maybe, and that then heightens that moment for the audience.
So yeah, when you're talking about building up soundscapes and that idea, I suppose it's worth breaking down the sort of different elements that go into that. So we touched upon Foley. That's one element, which is the individual sounds that you might record. But then you would also have sound effects that you might find on a library. There are huge databases of sound that you can draw from.
And there are the classic kind of whooshes, aren't there, that you see on logos or a swipe or something like that.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say they sort of indicate a moment it's going to happen, or we're moving on to another moment. But like you said, there are soundscapes that do so much more than that.
Yes. That's it. Yeah, you got the whooshes. There's two kinds of sound effects. So you've got these sort of diegetic sound effects, which is the sounds that exist within the world that you're looking at, and then the non-diegetic sounds, which are sometimes those over-the-top whooshes, or those sound effects which the characters in the film aren't hearing, but the audience is. So you've got those two layers, and then you've got things like music. Obviously, is a huge part of the sound. The dialogue is another huge part of the sound, and so you bring all of these elements together. And it's then about, when you're building a soundscape, it's about which ones do you want to draw out at any one time. Do you want the music to be overpowering at one point? Do you want the sound effects to really hone in on one moment? Or do you want it to be really about the dialogue and what they're saying? And so, building the soundscape is about merging those.
And that's creative decisions all the way through, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And kind of working, in some respects, with the client to work out kind of what those decisions are within the context of a brief. I think what I think is really, really interesting is that sound has always been there in film, hasn't it? And I think within the corporate space where we work and the social media space, what I find really interesting is sound it's almost become more and more and more important, isn't it? Heightened by, I've already said it already, the ASM sounds, where content creators are going out there and making, really fantastic films, but really relying heavily on those sound moments to almost get more hits and likes, right? If I think about some of the stuff I look at on social, which is cycling, I have to say, a lot of the time there's no music over it. You're just watching someone cycle, but you can hear the sound of the chain going, or the chain ring going, or the gears being shifted, and it definitely puts you in that moment a lot more, almost like you're cycling next to this person. And I think with socials, it's become just so important. I think I read somewhere that a social media clip with ASM sound all over it, which is effectively what we've been talking about all the way through, gets more hits than someone with just music over it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends what how you're trying to present yourself when you put a film out. I mean, if you do put a load of sounds in there that the characters in the film can't hear, music and these over-the-top sound effects and this, that, and the other thing, then it does suggest that this is a carefully curated thing that somebody's put together. Here's basically a film that you might pay to watch or something. Whereas if you're just putting in the sounds that the person in the video is hearing, it kind of feels more real. It kind of feels more like you're actually there, and more authentic in a way. And I think people are leaning towards more authentic content more and more these days, that they don't want something that feels orchestrated. They want something that's there in the moment. And so, just leaning heavily into the sound effects that you would expect to hear.
Heightening them slightly.
Heightening them, drawing them out, and making sure that they're crystal clear to hear is one thing, but making sure that they are the sounds that you would expect to see within that video clip, it feels a lot more authentic, and I think people like that.
It's also a joy, right? It's an absolute joy when you are, when we create a film or we see a film that's another agency's created, and the sound just comes through. It just feels like an absolute joy to watch. It does. Feels different.
It does. It feels different, and I think there's there's an element of editing in time with the music, and you see it in trailers all the time where they almost make music out of sound effects. And there's something really just satisfying about seeing vision sync with audio in a very structured way. That can be quite satisfying to see.
Yeah, I love film trailers. I used to, a lot of the ideas that certainly in the early days of my career, I'd watch film trailers over and over and over again, obviously pre-internet, over and over and over again, and I just loved it, and it was definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, the sound was everything for me, absolutely everything. Because I know we talked about it loads, but it gives you that feeling of excitement, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it really can just turn around even mundane footage.
Yeah.
You can be working with something that you might watch that and think, how are we going to polish that? And you might think, let's work on the colour grading, let's do all this, that, and the other thing. But if you just pause on the vision for a second, actually just improve the quality of the sound, then it can massively transform it. Because if you think, for example, I'll give you a choice. You can watch a really, really good-looking film with terrible sound, or you can watch a terrible-looking film with really good sound. Which one are you going to choose to watch?
The terrible film with great sound.
Exactly, every single time. The first time I watched Star Wars, I watched it on VHS, right? And I still enjoyed it just as much as when I saw it in the cinema.
Yeah.
Sure, it might be more immersive if you got that great picture, but the sound was there, and I could hear that. If you are struggling to hear what's going on and it's crackly, you just can't stand it.
Turn it off.
It's amazing how quickly you can't deal with that. Whereas the picture, you get lost in the story, even if it's a bit grainy, if it's a bit cropped, whatever, you can still enjoy it just as much.
Yeah.
Which really highlights just how much heavy lifting sound is doing.
Definitely. There have been some films which I definitely would have turned off. The Blair Witch Project, it was, the marketing on that was incredible, but the filming was, frankly, I think, ropey, but the sound was great. That's the thing that draw you in. Cloverfield, I think that's another one. Again, sort of Blair Witchy style, but obviously a lot bigger production. But again, the sound kind of draws you in again, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's a great film. I think it's just an independent film called This. It's just called This. That's the title of the film. And they had terrible cameras when they shot it, but they put the time in post to make sure the sound sounded good. And it's perfectly watchable. You perfectly just get into the film, and it's a really great film, but they had to get the sound right.
Another low budget one at the time, obviously, was Gareth Edwards' Monsters. Very, very low budget, and yet the sound on that is incredible. Again, spent time in post-production on the sound.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about AI, how AI is changing the world of sound. Because if I think about a project we're working on at the moment, which obviously we don't want to reveal because it's our Christmas film, when you create stuff on AI, there is no sound at all, is there?
Some platforms will actually provide sound.
They
these
will,
days.
okay.
And because for quite a while it has just been picture only, whereas now that it is generating sounds, and actually I find that sound is actually one of the main ways you can tell that something is AI.
Yes,
because it throws way too much in. That you might see all these Sora videos that are popping up online, and one of the main ways that you can tell that it is AI is just the bombardment of all sorts of weird noises that make no sense to be there. And
Well, the AI content you see online where it's people making some fun about something. I saw one recently about, camping in the British weather. It was very funny, but all the voices sound so tinny and just there's nothing to the sound. It just doesn't sound full.
No, and I think maybe again that's just a bias of the people creating these AI things. In the same way that people might overlook it when they're creating the film, we've spent ages doing all these images and videos, all the AI video generation. That's been developed for a long time. Whereas they're sort of catching up now a little bit with the sound, but it will catch up. And the AI music these days is indistinguishable now.
Yeah,
so it's
absolutely indistinguishable.
moving very fast.
For this Christmas film that we're making at the moment, we've created the track on an AI platform.
Yeah, in
and
seconds.
It sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
You could literally think we went and recorded that in a studio.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's just amazing. So yeah, I think AI without a doubt is going to change the world in so many ways, without a doubt.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
One of the biggest things, Harry, is that sounds can sometimes be sort of left to the end, can't it?
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the kind of things we should be thinking about really when we start a project and start to think about, if in the planning phase basically, and then in the creative phase, because we tend to put 3 creatives out, don't we? Maybe there's some things that we're missing in that, where we should be speaking about the sound more in those proposals to kind of give the idea to the client of kind of what it could sound like at the end, so it doesn't become an afterthought, because I think sometimes sound does become a little bit of an afterthought in production.
Yeah, it's very easy to make that mistake. And again, it just comes down to what is it that you're trying to achieve. It's the same as the picture. When you go into it trying to what kind of film are we making? Are we making something that wants to feel authentic, or something that really wants to feel really professional and polished? Are we trying to what is our intention? And we can draw back from that. What would we do with the picture? What would we do with the sound? And so the more of an idea our clients have of kind of what it is that we're trying, what is the end goal that we're trying to achieve, who are we talking to, it's those kind of questions that we always ask ourselves, but it's just remembering to think about that in the context of sound, and then that can help us make the decisions of what technically are we going to do with the sounds to help achieve that.
Brilliant. Harry, thank you very much.
No problem.
That's it for the Inside Edit this week. If you'd like to join us on other episodes, like us, and please let us know what you think about the podcast. And if there are any topics you'd like us to take on board and challenge us to do so. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening.